Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Coffee Card Events, and today we have an interesting video for you. But in this video, we're more so going to be forecasting the future of this counteroffensive instead of actually diving into bit-sized updates, because the bit-sized updates are just that bit size, and there's actually not a lot of advances on the Ukrainian side going on the front line. So we're going to start off in the south in the Zaporozhye area, and as you can see, the lines have not really changed substantially at all. In any location, whether you're looking at Velkanova Basilica or Orhiv or Kamyanske, the lines just haven't changed. So we're going to be diving into this and forecasting what's probably going to happen, what's likely to happen in the upcoming weeks and months. So as you probably already know, the Ukrainian counteroffensive, despite advancing slightly, has really seemingly reached a dead end. They're advancing literally meters a day, and this is according to their own Ministry of Defense. So if you take their claims as 100% truth, they are advancing meters per day in many cases. The problem is the Russians have established anywhere from 3 to 5 lines of defense. But as I said in my previous video, before these lines of defense, there is a 15 to 25 kilometer security zone. And the security zone is basically where there is a small grouping of Russian soldiers, or multiple small groupings of Russian soldiers at the front line. These guys deal with the Ukrainian assaults. Now, typically they'll combat these small-scale Ukrainian offensives in order to slow them down. Then they'll retreat and call in artillery strikes. And the Russians outnumber the Ukrainians in artillery 10 to 1. As we well know, artillery is the king of the battlefield, and so when you're outnumbered 10 to 1 in artillery and you do not have air superiority, and at the same time you're trying to launch an offensive, you can't expect good results. And these results are really just to be expected. So, considering the fact that the Ukrainians have not even reached the first line of defense, it is highly unlikely that they're going to break through the Russian defenses at all. They've been at this offensive for nearly 2 months. I don't have an exact number on the casualties they've taken as in manpower, but I do know within the first few weeks of their offensive, they lost about 30% of all the hardware that was sent by the West for this counteroffensive. And this is confirmed by the New York Times. So when you have Western media, Western, I would call state-run media, saying they're losing 30% of their stuff in the first few weeks, is not a good sign. And you have Western media finally preparing all the people to start to cope with the new reality, which was a reality to begin with. The Ukrainians are not going to break through these lines unless they get an air force, which you can't just get an air force. Training for aircraft takes years. Pilots have to know how to fly the aircraft, how to maintenance the aircraft, how to use them, and how to use them as a team. So this is going to take a long time, and F-16s are probably not going to be coming anytime soon. I mean, per Biden's guys in the government, they'll probably be coming at the end of this year. The counteroffensive will not be going on this long. So it's highly unlikely the Ukrainians are to break through the Russian positions. I mean, it's highly unlikely they'll reach Tokmak. Tokmak is right here, and it was one of the Ukrainian original targets of this counteroffensive. You see, the goal of the Ukrainian counteroffensive was to split the land bridge in Zaporozhye, essentially come from Orhiv or Velkanova Basilica and create a gap in the Russian land bridge. What that would do is it would split Russian forces from Donbass and Kherson and cause a major logistical problem, especially considering the fact that if the Ukrainians were able to accomplish this, they can knock the Kerch Strait bridge out almost certainly. So when you consider the fact that the first part of the Ukrainian offensive was likely to go from here near Orhiv all the way to Tokmak, that was the first objective. That is about a 25 kilometer stretch from the line of contact. During this entire counteroffensive in the Orhiv front, they've only advanced about 3 kilometers. So if you put that in perspective, they've advanced a little over 10% of the way to get to this one city, and this one city is not even the major objective. The major objective would be get all the way down to here to Melitopol, which is 78 kilometers away. If you put that in perspective, the Ukrainians have accomplished this in 5% of their mission, while managing to lose 30% of the equipment sent by the West within the first few weeks. These are not odds for a successful offensive. So the odds are not in their favor. I heard a lot of other YouTubers, a lot of these other Ukraine fanboys, who whenever something goes wrong, they just start coping immediately. They find something to say. And one of these people, I'm not going to name him because I'm not going to start doing defamation on YouTube, but one of these guys, he said that the Ukrainian operation, he said, oh, well, remember people, D-Day took 10 weeks for the Allies to break through the major German lines. It does not make sense. In D-Day, the Allies had air superiority. Not only that, they had superiority in artillery as well. And they outnumbered the Nazis about 3 to 1 in manpower. The exact opposite is true for the Ukrainians. The Russians have air dominance. They outnumber the Ukrainians 5 to 10 to 1 in artillery, and they likely have more soldiers in this area than the Ukrainians do. It's funny how people who are desperate to cope with the situation they don't like will find any scenario in history and compare it to a modern scenario when the factors that made that scenario a victory just don't line up in the current situation. In reality, the Ukrainians are highly unlikely to penetrate this line in the south. If you go near Bakhmut, and this is where the Ukrainians have shifted their focus because their assaults in the south have been ending disastrously, if you look near Bakhmut, they have made substantial gains here. And this is where the potential for a Ukrainian breakthrough does seem to heighten just a little bit. Because if you look at what they've done, they've creeped in on Berkivka, the northern flank of Bakhmut, and they've also creeped in on Klishivka. Now here's the thing. I said this before in previous videos. The Ukrainians do not have to actually encircle Bakhmut to cause a Russian withdrawal. Theoretically here. This is in theory. All they have to do is give the appearance of an encirclement. We've seen the Russians do this in multiple areas. When it looks like they're going to be encircled, they just immediately withdraw because they don't want to be encircled. So all they really have to do is give the appearance of an encirclement. I mean, think about it. Hypothetically, if the Ukrainians took Berkivka and then moved on to Krasnohora, you can easily see how the scenario is not good for the Russians. They completely flanked him. Not only they flanked Soledar, they've also flanked Bakhmut. And the same thing goes for Klishivka. If the Ukrainians take Klishivka, there is essentially nothing stopping them. There's no major town for like 4 kilometers. So the Ukrainians essentially just move either down here, okay, to Odradivka, or just move forward to Zayetsiv. Either way, Bakhmut is flanked. And if the Ukrainians did advance near Zayetsiv, that's when they would start facing the Russian lines of defense behind Bakhmut. But keep in mind, these Russian lines are behind Bakhmut, so Bakhmut is not nearly as fortified as the south of Ukraine. And that's why the Ukrainians have a better advantage here. The Russians have deployed VDV and other elite forces to deal with this Ukrainian offensive, and they've been doing a pretty good job at it. The media will see Ukraine take ground, and all of a sudden the media headlines go crazy. Oh, Ukraine's about to re-liberate Bakhmut. The problem is what they're not mentioning is the Russians are practicing a strategy known as defense in depth. I just explained it previously. In other words, the first line of light forces will fall back. And when these forces fall back, the incoming offensive forces, in this case would be the Ukrainians, will get hammered by artillery and then face a massive counterattack from Russian mobile reserves. This is an extremely effective form of combat. It worked at the Battle of Kursk, and it worked many other times. So this is just an effective form of combat. So just because you see the Russians give up a position does not mean they're permanently giving up a position. It's part of a strategy. I think really a lot of people in the media knows, but they just don't want to talk about it. So while I think there's potential for Ukrainian breakthrough near Bakhmut, whether it's on the north flank near Berkivka or the south flank near Klishivka, or both, I don't think a potential breakthrough is imminent as of now. And then if you go north, it just gets worse for the Ukrainians. In fact, the Russians have launched their own offensive in the north, targeting Liman from here, and also launching an offensive targeting Kupiansk. Kupiansk is strategically important due to the railroad hub it has there, and the Russians are about 9 kilometers from central Kupiansk. This is attritional warfare, and armies do advance meters and kilometers per day, but they're still pretty close. So up in the north, the Russians have launched their own offensive. In fact, Ukrainians have suggested that the Russians have about 100,000 troops between Kupiansk and Liman, as well as 900 to 1,100 tanks. So that is a substantial force. So basically, with all this information, I think the best forecasting, the best prediction we can make for this Ukrainian offensive is that it will ultimately fail. Let me explain what I mean by that, because you'll have people, if Ukrainians accomplish somewhat of a significant breakthrough, say, oh, it was a victory. No. The original objective was to break through the south that would sever the Russian forces in Donbass from southern Ukraine. If that objective is not met, their counteroffensive has failed to meet its first objective. If they do not at least get to Tokmak, they have not made significant progress. So that's what I'm saying. The best prediction is that the Ukrainian counteroffensive will fail, considering that they've reached about 5% in bad cases and 10% in best cases of the territory they have to clear. And they've lost 30% of all Western equipment with the first weeks of this offensive. So at the end of the day, I don't think the Ukrainian offensive will be going anywhere anytime soon. I do think there is a potential for Ukrainian breakthrough New Bakhmut, but as I said, I don't think that's imminent. So that's the prediction we have for today. Be sure to subscribe to Coffee and Current Events so we're not missing out on any updates we have coming at you. Share this video with a friend. God bless and stay informed.